There we go. All right. Welcome to the Collision. I'm Dave Zirin, joined as always by 11-year NBA veteran, author, and man about town, Etan Thomas. We're about to have a very important conversation with somebody who is at the top of the game when it comes to college and pro basketball analysis. He also was the starting center on the 1985-1986 Duke Blue Devils, which was that first team that showed the world that Coach K was going to build something to last. Thrilled to have him on the show, Jay Bilas. Mr. Bilas, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
Great. Just my first opening question, because this is something I've always wanted to ask you. You're able to bring something to the TV where you are able to make digestible, very intricate comments about the game and about recruitment and about player potential. How was law school and being an attorney preparation for the kind of basketball analysis you try to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think law school was really helpful in helping me formulate any argument. And it also helped me when I got into a spirited debate with a colleague, not to get my feelings hurt, that it's not about the person, it's about the point and the argument. But certainly practicing law and being in court and having to be an advocate and try to make your point as quickly as possible so the judge doesn't get tired of you was helpful. So I appreciate you saying that. That's very kind. I don't know if it's true, but it's very kind. But I think I'd be a totally different person and professional if I hadn't gone to law school and practiced law for as long as I did.
And real quick, what's scarier, facing a judge or facing a national television audience on, say, NBA draft night?
Judge.
Not even close.
That's an easy answer.
I knew
you said that real quick.
That's a true lawyer.
Right well, the audience may have contempt for me, but the judge can hold you in contempt.
A little bit of a different power relationship. Very true. Etan, throwing it to you, sir. I know you've got some big cues.
Definitely. So I've been following what's been going on with Trump and the executive orders to try to limit the amount of NIL that college players can receive. And I just wanted, you're the perfect person to talk about this with, from both a legal standpoint, what is possible and what is not possible, because there's a lot of misinformation going around right now about the facts of what Trump actually has. President Trump has the actual power to do, and what an executive order, how it's actually implemented or not implemented. So just wanted to give you a floor to just break down for everyone, and then give us our recommendations as far as what would be the best way for the NCAA to proceed from here. But let's first start so we can get all the facts and what has transpired just actually yesterday.
Well, I mean, from what I could gather, there was just a news release and news reports about an executive order that the president signed with regard to college sports. So I haven't read the order itself, but read some of the reporting and then the White House statement on it. And from the statement and the bullet points that were included in the statement from the White House, I didn't see anything different from what the NCAA has said with regard to NIL going forward. That essentially it has to be, it can't be quote unquote pay for play. It's got to be a market-based deal. And under whether it was the House settlement or the current NCAA rules, and now with Brian Seeley coming in to operate this new entity that's going to oversee this area, what the NCAA was essentially trying to do is limit compensation to the $20.5 million cap that was allowable now under the House settlement. And then there's still third-party NIL, but there will still be collectives, but the deals have to be market-based. In other words, I think what the NCAA was trying to avoid was a collective paying a ton of money to a player. Say they're giving a player $1 million, and it's coming from a local car dealership that only nets $500,000. Well, no car dealership making $500,000 a year would pay an ambassador or someone to do commercials for them double what they make. that's not a market-based deal. That would just be sort of trying to circumvent this cap that's being allowed under the settlement. So I'm not sure that this executive order really does anything that the NCAA wasn't trying to do. But be that as it may, like an executive order, whatever person is next as president after this current president could rescind that order in their first day of office. So, I don't know the reach of it. Congress hasn't done anything about this yet and may still. We don't know that. And to me, there was only, without this executive order, I thought there was maybe a 3, and I'm guessing, but I thought there was a 3 to 5 year window that the NCAA had to try to put something longer lasting in place. That really the House settlement is just putting one illegal wage cap in place of another one. It's a much higher one because before it was 0 and now it's 20.5 million per school. But that's not going to last forever. So I felt like the NCAA was going to have to do one of two things. And I did hear some rumblings that there may be executive action. But I thought they would either have to go the route of collectively bargaining with the players or continuing to seek essentially an antitrust exemption from Congress. The Congress would enact a federal law that would preempt all these state laws and give the NCAA a framework they could work with. But in my view, I don't think it would have been exactly what the NCAA wanted. Because look, if I were a legislator and someone was asking me to limit someone's pay, then I'd want to go, well, why aren't we limiting coaches' pay and administrators' pay? So you're telling us that the athletes, the engines behind this entire enterprise, they're the only ones that are going to be limited and everybody else is going to make whatever the market allows? No, I mean, I wouldn't do that. I think everything's working the way it is. Could it be better? Of course. But the answers and the solution to this is all within the NCAA's power. They're just not doing it. They want Congress to do it, or now maybe the president. But they've been negligent here, and whatever they're complaining about is their fault and their fault alone.
Jay, do you believe that it's advantageous for all parties, in theory, to just throw away the market-based model and start collectively bargaining with players? Because then it would not only get away from the congressional morass, but it would also allow for some order to the system that's understandable, which certainly I know that that's the fan complaint, is lack of understanding of what the heck is happening and the advantages involved. Collective bargaining, we have experience with understanding that as fans. Does that, and at the same time, of course, then players get more ownership of what they need. It might not be wages, it might be health, etc. Do you think collective bargaining is advantageous, or am I missing something about the market approach?
No, I think it's advantageous. I think it's the players have to have a seat at the table, in my view. They have to have a say in this. And whether it's collective bargaining or the players form some sort of trade union that can negotiate with the NCAA for working conditions and pay and all those things, like the as you know, the NFL and NBA, they have a players association. They agree. They're essentially in partnership with the league. And they agree on salary. They on salary caps, minimum salaries, working conditions, all that stuff. And it's taken out of antitrust because the parties agree. It's called a non-statutory labor exemption. And college can do that. There may be a few hurdles with public and private institutions. I understand that it's not the easiest thing, and we're not dealing with 30 NBA teams and one players association. It would be a little bit more complicated than that. But what we're really talking about are the top end schools that are the main issue here, the top 100 institutions in both football and basketball. But it's certainly achievable. I mean, the reason that we haven't moved an inch in all these decades because the NCAA didn't want to. They were protected all these years by by a Supreme Court decision, dicta in a Supreme Court decision. And when they took the Alston case to the Supreme Court and lost 9-0, they lost all their protections.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they caved and tried to settle the House case, because they were going to lose $5+ billion and still be in the same position.
Mm-hmm.
So, look, this has been a stunning lack of foresight by the NCAA in reaching this point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still an unbelievably healthy system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I get your point, Dave, that fans may be a little bit unsettled, largely because they hear the coaches and ADs do nothing but complain.
Mm-hmm.
All they do is complain because the players can transfer now.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me is like, really? Like, come on. If you want them to stay, then sign them to contracts and pay them what they're worth. But if you're not going to do that, then they're students to be treated like any other student, as is said in every foundational document of the NCAA. And they don't tell any other student what they can earn or accept while they're in school, or whether they can transfer and participate in whatever activities they want at their new school. They're kind of in a bind with all that. But yet, while everybody that's involved in college sports seems to be complaining, ratings have gone up, interest has gone up. We've certainly seen players stay in, especially in basketball, players stay in school longer rather than shorter periods. So this idea that doomsday is around the corner, the NCAA has been screaming doomsday for 40 years now, and it hadn't come around, and it's not coming anytime soon.
So if I could ask you this, because I'm looking at this, and there's no, association, no union, no anything like that with the players. How could you realistically put that together, being that college players are so transient? I mean, you're only there for a few years. Who would actually sit on the board or the union, if they were to form for a union? I would think, and this is just me personally thinking about this, about hearing people saying how it could not possibly be done, and how complicated it would be, and it would cause so much trouble. So they have a few different things, and I saw that they have like the athletes.org and what they're trying to do. But college coaches have a union, right? And they negotiate and they agree upon certain things. Would as now that since college players are now having to have representation, could that representation that they have form a union, since they're going to be representing college players for the long run? Like, I don't know how you would have college athletes on the union because they're only there for a few years, but they have the representation has an actual invested interest in, because they're going to have clients there for decades, for however long, and they could collectively bargain on different aspects as far as cap and movement and everything else. Would that be something that would be doable, or do you think that's kind of out of the realm of possibility?
It's absolutely doable. First, your point, the coaches have a coaches association. I'm not aware of any college coaches union, but they do have a coaches association that allows them to speak more with one voice. They don't do it as well as perhaps they should, speaking with one voice. Everybody seems to be, just giving their own opinion here and there. But I honestly don't think it'd be all that much different than it is in the NBA or the NFL. I mean, what's the average time that a player spends in the NBA? 3 or 4 years. It's really not that much different. Now, certainly there are players that have, like yourself, that have 11-year, 15-year careers. LeBron's played over 20, KD's 17 or 18, whatever it is. You have players like that. You have a lot of players who play less.
Right.
But you could certainly form a union and do that, or a trade association. My thing is I don't understand why the NCAA just doesn't allow their schools, like, look, pay your athletes whatever you want. We're not policing what you're paying your coaches. We're not policing what you pay your professors or the landscape professionals at your school. You guys know what these players are worth. Pay them what you want. And if you want to sign them to contracts, sign them to contracts. But the prohibition against before the House settlement, the strict prohibition that the NCAA had of schools paying players directly is one of the reasons we're in this situation right now. It's really, to me, pretty simple. I went to Duke. If Duke's recruiting me and they offer me a 3-year contract with an option for a 4th year, they can put a buyout in there.
Mm-hmm.
Put a buyout in the contract. I'm probably not going anywhere. It's not that somebody else would want me, but if they did, they'd have to pay my buyout and the enough money to make me jump. And it's very unlikely that's going to happen for that many players. So I think that helps alleviate the transfer problem, or at least what people consider a problem. To me, when players transfer, way too many coaches, their first thing is, well, nobody wants to go through adversity again, as if they go into somebody's living room saying, hey, come to my school. We're going to give you a lot of adversity. That's not a selling point. And, if you want them to stay, treat them better. But if it's a business transaction, then sign them to a contract. And then everybody has negotiated at arm's length. But they want the players for less. They don't want to pay that much for them. But no, notice nobody has ever said we need a salary cap for coaches. So I saw something. Maybe it was in the materials for the executive order. Somebody had said something about maybe there's something in there, if I remember right, about the cost being paid by collectives for a team. Maybe the number was $30 to $50 million. And it treated it as if this was some outrageous sum. I don't have all the numbers on this, but my guess is if you tallied up everything Ohio State is paying to its football staff, you would get to a number that would make people's eyes pop out. And you can't tell me that the players on the field aren't worth every bit as much, if not more, than the staff at Ohio State. Strength coaches in the Big Ten and the SEC in football are making well over $1 million. Some of them more than that. And nobody can tell me with a straight face that the strength coach is worth more than the quarterback or wide receiver or all that, or a point guard. That strikes me as being nonsensical.
Now, I know what Etan thinks about this because he's dealt with it with his amazing son, Malcolm. But I want to ask you this question, Jay. I do hear people who could be hearing this and say, I agree with Jay on the market questions, the payment questions, the coaching questions. But I look at this transfer portal and I'm asking myself, why do college athletes seem to actually have more freedom of movement than the professionals? And I'm also concerned, I'm speaking as the person who's hearing this, I'm also concerned that the numbers of people transferring are going up astronomically, which maybe says something about the values that we're putting on staying somewhere. And are we losing that with this outbreak of this freedom of movement? Are we losing too much to have something which on the face seems like just a basic right you should have to jump from any school you want?
Yeah, and those are great questions. But really the point is, if you don't want them to jump, then pay them.
Gotcha.
And they haven't been able to pay them. And now they can. So maybe that changes. Maybe now with the House settlement, they'll sign a player to a contract. They'll put a buyout in the contract. And that'll, the business deal will take care of the transferring. Look, I agree, Dave. Would I prefer that everybody made a commitment and held to that commitment? Sure. Of course I would prefer that. But what does it say that when the players could leave, they had a choice, they're exercising that choice? To me, when you looked all those years before, when Etan and I, when all of us were in school, players didn't transfer because they couldn't. So was it loyalty or just they couldn't? If I wanted to transfer from Duke, I didn't. But if I wanted to transfer, I would have had to sit out a year. I would have had to give up a year of my life in order to do that. That was a restriction. And one of the things that most fans, the overwhelming majority of fans don't know or understand is that when the transfer restriction was in place, it was called a year in residence. When that was in place, it was in place for only 5 sports: football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, and hockey. Every other sport could transfer and be eligible right away.
Mm-hmm.
So what that told me was there is zero principle involved here. It's not a principle that we think this is better or we value education or all that other stuff. It was the players in these sports are money-making assets more than everybody else, and we need to retain our money-making assets. And the NCAA punted on that restriction for two reasons. One, it didn't make any sense. Like the year in residence was designed as or trumpeted as, when you transfer, you need a year to get used to your new school and acclimate yourself to your new school. Well, why would a person with college experience need a year when a freshman with no college experience at all is eligible right away?
Mm-hmm.
That was just a remnant of freshman ineligibility and wanting to control player movement. So the NCAA knew, man, this doesn't make any sense. We have no justification for this, and we're fighting over money in court in the Alston case and the House case. If we don't do something about this transfer restriction, they're going to make us look bad, and we got to fix this on our own. They came up with this transfer portal thing. Is it perfect? No. There are a lot of things I would change about the transfer portal, but absent having a contractual obligation, there's no way they can stay. They can say with a straight face, you should have to stay here, and we're allowed to lie to you, and we're allowed to treat you badly, and if you want to go, you have to sit out a year, and we can block your transfer in certain instances. It was just wrong, and so I don't think. I've heard Charlie Baker say, for those that are complaining about the transfer portal, we're not going back to the old system ever. Yeah. So at least while he's there.
I think the one thing that a lot of people don't understand, unless they've gone through it, now the college players will all understand this, is that a lot of times coaches kind of force players to transfer. They tell them, you're not going to play here anymore. We're going to recruit over you, and that person is going to play. And that happens a lot more than a lot of people think. A lot of players do not want to transfer, but they're told by the coaches that you should go someplace else. And I think I always tell people that when they talk about all the players, their commitments, and they don't have it, there's no commitment from the school to the player. When the school is done with you or wants something different, you know what I mean, or just doesn't like anything about you, you're an employee at will, and they want you to just go someplace else, they tell you that in the exit meetings. But one thing I wanted to ask you, just shifting this, I was reading about something called the SCORE Act. And that was basically a different place where this could land, dealing with the Senate that had to get Senate approval for this executive order that Trump has put on the NCAA's desk. And that could be a possible way to push it through. I just wanted to talk to you about that. I didn't quite understand it when I was reading it, but that's what I read about the SCORE Act. Could you break that down for me, please?
Etan, I'm not sure I understand that either. I haven't seen that, so I'd have to take a look at that and dig into it further. Okay. And that's sort of the issue with doing anything by executive action. It's just the force of it. How long of a solution would this be? I mean, how many years? If the next president can come in and just rescind it, the NCAA is back to square one. And so to me, and again, I haven't seen anything. I haven't read the order, but I haven't seen anything in the coverage that tells me that this is going to be any different than what the NCAA has said already. And I get wanting to protect other sports and women's sports and all that. That's fantastic. I mean, who would argue with that? But, to me, it kind of goes back to this thing about, the players didn't set this system up. They're not the ones that negotiated these multi-billion-dollar television contracts. They didn't do any of this. My thing is, if the players are old enough to sell for billions of dollars and to be treated like employees, they should be compensated as such, and they should be allowed to negotiate for their fair market value, just like everyone else in American society. The only person in the college sports world that is told how much they can earn or accept, or whether they can earn or accept compensation, is an athlete. Every other student, non-athlete student, can make as much money as the market will allow while they're in school, whether they're on scholarship or not. And it doesn't affect their status as a student in one bit. And look, I know that things have changed since you and I were in school. You know, when if we took a sandwich, we would be considered criminals. We could lose our eligibility. Like, I get it. Those days are over, and that's fantastic that that's gone. Nobody's asking, hey, where'd you get that car? How could you afford that watch?
Right.
You know, at least that's over, which is a very nice thing. But there are no controls. Nobody's asking for any controls on athletic spending, on coaches' salaries, on anything to do with this multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry, except, boy, we have to have strict controls on what athletes can do and what athletes can accept. And to me, when college football makes more than the NFL and college basketball makes more than the NBA, the idea that the players are greedy really kind of pisses me off because we don't say that to any other person in our society.
That's exactly right. Well, Jay Bilas, you've been incredibly generous with your time. I end with one basketball fanboy question. I'm a 5-minute drive from Northwestern High School, a 10-minute drive from UMD. The greatest player, arguably, at both of those institutions was a guy named Len Bias. You played against Len Bias, and I wanted to ask you, because, you know, it's almost like Paul Bunyan or Bo Jackson, where we have to do things like this through stories because, you know, YouTube doesn't cover folks from that era. What was it like to play against Len Bias?
You know, Dave, there were like 3 or 4 players in the ACC when I was a player back in the dark ages. Michael Jordan, Ralph Sampson, and I'd say Len Bias were the 3 players that stood out above all others that you kind of couldn't game plan for. They were so good. And I felt Bias was the same year I was. You know, Sampson was older. He was a senior when I was a freshman, and Jordan was a year ahead of me in school and left after his junior year, which was my sophomore year. So I only played against Jordan teams for 2 years in school. But I played against Bias teams for 4 years. And he was Superman. That had he lived, I really do believe he would have been the direct counterpart to Jordan in the NBA. Just a magnificent athlete, a beautiful jump shooter, and you knew he was in the building the minute he walked in. And it's really one of the great tragedies of my lifetime. I mean, I kind of likened it. My parents marked time by when President Kennedy was assassinated. And I think my generation, at least athletically, everybody remembers where they were when they heard that Len Bias died. And I would have loved to have said, or to say now, that something good came out of it, but nothing good came out of it. Nothing. I mean, all the people that were incarcerated based upon mandatory minimums that came from the death of Len Bias, and after that, Don Rogers. People kind of forget about that one. Don Rogers died not long after Len Bias in a similar circumstance. What our government did with those mandatory minimums, the countless people have wasted away in jail over low-level offenses for no reason. And it's just kind of the whole thing. It's kind of sickening, really. And but man, when you think back on what Bias was, I mean, for young people, go on to YouTube and watch his highlights and tell me there's been anybody better that's come along since then. He was unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me jump in before we stop, because I want to ask you a question myself, and I want to get your take on this. And Dave wrote an amazing article on this topic, in the Nation, just this morning. It came out this morning, right? And I want to get your take on it, because Hulk Hogan just passed away, and I grew up a Hulkamaniac. I was the one who was flexing little in the mirror, saying if I take my vitamins and train and everything like that, I'll grow up to be just like me. And I believe that to the heart. And that's the way my mom got me to eat my vegetables. And you know what I mean? That I was that whole night. And then I heard the tape. And the tape was with him saying a lot of racist, derogatory, calling black people the N-word. It was heartbreaking for the child me who looked up to Hulk Hogan as this bigger than life character. I mean, I had the Hulk Hogan shirt. I had the Hulk Hogan action figure. It was not a doll. It was an action figure. And I always made that distinction. You know, I had the Hulk Hogan everything. So I had a lot of mixed emotions yesterday, to be honest. And I just wanted to get your response to all of that. Like, where were you with everything? And were you a Hulk Hogan fan at all?
You know, I didn't grow up a wrestling fan. I saw some of it growing up. Oddly enough, I was one of those guys that I loved boxing growing up. So I was a huge boxing fan. And when I was a kid, and Dave's closer in age to me than you are, but when we were younger, the NFL wasn't the biggest deal back then. It's grown into being the biggest deal. Who could have imagined the NFL would grow to this? But back then, boxing and horse racing were gigantic, and baseball probably was the biggest of the sports. So, you know, but to your point on like, there's so many things that as you get older, and then you learn, you know, you get behind the curtain on things that disappoint you. And so you have an image of something when you're a kid, and then you find out, wait a minute, this person's not what I thought he or she was. And that's one of the things that, you know, whether it's Lance Armstrong, there's all kinds of things that we can go into, whether it's sports or beyond. Those are the things that often stick out, are when you build someone up, whether it's a politician, somebody in business, or an athlete, and they disappoint you. And like I you know, one of the things about today's political environment that I have to remind myself is, you know, when I was a kid, before Richard Nixon resigned in 1974, I trusted what politicians said, and there was a different feeling in the U.S. about our leaders, and who I never would have imagined that we would be at this point where truth is questioned. Like we have to. I mean, how do we determine? You know, facts now are disputed. Right. And I remember, I don't even remember who it was. Was it who said you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts? It seems like now you're entitled to your own facts. Right. And when that's the case, how do we get anywhere? I know I rambled on to your original question, but I understand the feeling of being disappointed, and so I'm probably more skeptical of things now than I was when I was a kid.
Well, one thing I'm not skeptical of, and actually, there are two things I'm not skeptical of. One is how awesome boxing was when we were coming up. I held this up because this was my guy, not Hulk Hogan. Marvelous, Marvin Hagler. And the second thing that I'm certain of, Jay, is that, you know, you're at the top of a business that, frankly, I'm very concerned about. And I just think it's remarkable that you've been able to keep up your high standards in the ups and downs of what is a very challenging time in sports media. So thank you for talking with us, and thank you for being you and the work you do.
No, thank you guys. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Definitely. You're doing what you're doing.
Terrific. We'll be back right after this. I'm just saying that so we have a nice break. Because I'm not sure what this is, but thank you so much, Jay.
No, Dave, Etan, thank you guys for having me.
All right.
Awesome.